She loved it here. She spent most of the time here. Showing you around today is very much a case I'm trying to make sure I'm doing it the way she'd want you to see it.
In her final days, Queen Elizabeth II made sure her favorite granddaughter would always have a place at Balmoral. Yet after the Queen's passing, the arrangement nearly got lost in the chaos of a new reign. But not only did William ensure his grandmother's wishes were honored, he excluded Camilla completely. What could have caused him to make such a decision? Let's find out. The Queen's secret gift. There are things that happen inside a royal family that never make the front pages. They are decided, written into private documents, and kept between a small number of trusted people. One of those things happened in the years before Queen Elizabeth II passed away at Balmoral in September 2022. Long before her health began to decline in a visible way, the late Queen had taken care of something very personal. She had decided what she wanted to leave to the granddaughter she had grown closer to than almost anyone else in her large family. That granddaughter was the eldest child of Prince Edward and Sophie. Lady Louise Alice Elizabeth Mary Mountbatten Windsor was born on November 8, 2023 at Frimley Park Hospital. Her full name was officially revealed 18 days later. Louise was christened on April 24, 2004 in the private chapel at Windsor Castle by David Connor. During the ceremony, she became the last royal baby to wear the historic original royal christening gown, a garment used by generations of the royal family for over a century. Meanwhile, the Queen had a plan that involved the place she loved most in the world, Balmoral. This place has never belonged to the crown. It is private property, passed down through the family like any other personal possession. Prince Albert bought it in 1852, and since that time it has moved from one generation to the next through personal inheritance. This means the monarch can make decisions about parts of the estate without going through government channels or royal protocol. The Queen understood this very well. She had inherited Balmoral from her own father. There is already a well-known example of this kind of private gifting. Prince William received a cottage called Tamnagar from his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, shortly before she passed away in 2002. That small three-bedroom cottage on the Balmoral grounds became a personal retreat for William and Catherine, a place tied to their early days together as students at St. Andrews University. The Queen Mother had made that choice outside of any formal royal process, and the gift had stood without challenge ever since. Queen Elizabeth had seen how a private gift of property on the estate could give a family member something stable, and she decided to do something similar for Louise. The bond between the Queen and Lady Louise was something that people inside the royal world had noticed for years. A royal insider described Louise as the Queen's favorite granddaughter, noting how she and her brother James genuinely loved spending time at Balmoral. While other grandchildren grew older and drifted toward their own lives in London and elsewhere, Louise kept coming back to the Scottish estate with a real sense of belonging. She rode horses there, and the Queen had watched with visible pride and emotion. The two of them shared something that went beyond a formal grandparent-grandchild relationship. Because Balmoral is held under a trust and managed through a deed of nomination and appointment, gifts from within the estate's private structures are entirely possible when arranged correctly. The Queen had full authority over her personal decisions within those arrangements. She had spent decades managing every detail of royal life with precision and care, and she applied that same deliberate thinking to what she wanted to leave behind for Louise. The decision was not made in haste. It was thought through with the seriousness the Queen brought to everything she did. The late Queen knew that within the sprawling 50,000-acre estate, there were properties that could be gifted, assigned, or left to specific people she trusted. The estate includes around 150 buildings, from lodges to small cottages tucked into the Scottish hills. A cottage on the estate, one of the smaller properties set into the Highland landscape, away from the main castle, was identified as the right choice. It was the kind of place where Louise could breathe freely, away from London and public life. The Queen had always believed that Balmoral was where the family could simply be themselves. The former press secretary to the Queen once reflected on how much the estate meant to the whole family, noting that it was a place where they could be normal people for a while. For Louise, who had grown up largely outside of royal duty and the public eye, that sense of normal life at Balmoral was very real. She visited every summer as a child. She had helped with the younger cousins during family gatherings there. She had learned to ride on those hills. The Queen saw in Louise a person who would honor the estate and love it in the way it deserved to be loved. Arrangements for the gift were handled in the careful, private way that such matters within the royal family always are. The decision was signed inside documents, known only to the people who needed to know. The Queen did not need to make her intentions loud. Balmoral was hers to manage. Louise was a granddaughter she loved deeply and believed in completely. The gift was a reflection of both those things. It was also something else, a statement made without words, written into the future of the estate itself. Louise would have a place there, not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as someone with a real and lasting connection to the land the Queen had loved from the time she was a child. The cottage comes to light. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away at Balmoral in September 2022, the estate that she had loved since childhood entered a new chapter. The castle itself passed to King Charles as part of the private inheritance that moves from sovereign to sovereign outside of the crown estate. But Balmoral is not just a castle. It is a vast working estate with lodges, farmland, grouse moors, forests, and around 150 separate buildings scattered across 50,000 acres of Scottish Highland. Each of those properties carries its own history, its own purpose, and in some cases, its own private story. The Queen had been thorough. She always was. In the years before her passing, she had put her affairs in order in the way that someone both private and precise would do. The arrangements she had made around certain properties on the Balmoral estate were not tucked away. They were handled properly, with the kind of care that would ensure her wishes could not be easily overlooked. The documentation was clear. One of the smaller cottages on the estate had been designated in a way that pointed unmistakably toward Lady Louise Windsor. It was the kind of thing that, once discovered, would immediately raise questions among those who had not known about it. The first people to understand what had happened were those closest to the estate's management. Balmoral runs as a working property with a full staff, and the people who help manage its buildings and lands knew the estate in intimate detail. They were familiar with every structure, every arrangement, and every change that had been put in place over the years. The Queen's gift was not invisible to the people whose job it was to oversee the property. When it became clear what had been arranged, word began to move through the tight network of people who served the family. This was not gossip. It was information, and it carried weight because of who had made the decision and who else was involved. Among the royal family members themselves, the knowledge spread in the way such things always do in palace circles. The family was still deep in a period of public mourning, moving through state funerals, vigils, and all the visible machinery of royal grief. Behind that public face, the private business of the late Queen's estate was being understood and processed. Edward and Sophie learned what had been arranged for Louise. They understood it as exactly what it was, a deliberate and loving act by the Queen, directed toward their daughter. For Edward especially, who had always maintained one of the most steadfast loyalties within the royal family, there was both pride and a quiet kind of relief in knowing his mother had done this. Within the castle at Balmoral itself, and at Birkhall where Charles and Camilla had retreated in the days after the Queen's passing, different people were absorbing different parts of the Queen's final private arrangements. Charles had known his mother's wishes in a general sense, as the heir who would inherit the estate and take responsibility for its management. But the specific detail of what had been left to Louise touched a different part of the family picture. It was not a threat to Charles's ownership of the broader estate. That was settled. Balmoral passed to him as the new king, but within it, Louise had been given something that placed her permanently in that landscape. Prince William heard about the arrangement through family channels, not long after the main period of mourning had passed. His reaction was not one of surprise. William had grown up, understanding that Balmoral was a place of both public tradition and private family life. He had his own cottage there, given to him by the Queen Mother. He knew better than most how personal such a gift could be, and what it meant for a person's sense of place within the family. When he understood what had been arranged for Louise, something settled in him. Louise had earned it through years of genuine presence at Balmoral, through her real love of the place, and through the bond she had built with the Queen over summers that stretched back to her earliest childhood. The picture that had begun to form in the weeks after the Queen's passing was becoming clearer. The people who needed to know were beginning to know. And with that knowledge came the natural next question. What would happen now that the Queen was gone, and the people who had always existed in her shadow would each have to define their own connection with what she had left behind? Some of those people would accept what had been arranged with grace. Others would feel, for their own reasons, that the new arrangement touched something they had considered settled. The coming months would reveal exactly who stood where, and what each of them was prepared to do about it. The future king steps in. Prince William has never been a man who sits back when he believes something matters. From the early years of his public life to his widely visible role as heir to the throne, William has shown a willingness to act on the things he considers important. He has pushed back on press intrusion and spoken publicly about causes other royals have kept at a distance. He has made clear, through his choices and his actions, that he has a strong personal sense of what the royal family should stand for and how it should conduct itself. When it became fully clear to him what the late Queen had arranged for Lady Louise at Balmoral, he did not take it as background information. He took it as something that required his active attention and support. His personal connection to Balmoral gave him a particular kind of authority in this situation. William had grown up spending summers on that estate, just as Louise had. He knew its rhythms, its buildings, its meaning to the family in a way that could not be learned from a distance. His own cottage, Tamnagar, had been a part of his life since before he and Catherine were married, an anchor in the Scottish Highlands that he and his family returned to every summer. He understood in a direct and lived way what it meant to hold a private piece of that estate. It was not just property. It was a connection to history, to family, and to the late Queen herself. When he thought about what Louise had been given, he thought about it through that lens. William also understood the family dynamics that were shifting around Balmoral following the Queen's passing. King Charles now held the estate. Camilla was at Birk Hall, just a short distance from the main castle and from the other properties on the grounds. The relationships and loyalties that had always operated under the Queen's steady presence were now having to find their footing in a different order. Charles was king. That changed everything at the top of the family structure. But it did not change the Queen's personal wishes. It did not change what she had decided for Louise. And it did not change William's view that those wishes deserved to be honored in full, without interference or dilution. He made his position known within the family in the controlled way he tends to handle serious matters. There's a way things worked now, and William knew it well. Instead, he communicated his support for Louise's inheritance through the significant channels inside the royal family. Direct conversations with the people who had the authority and information to act on what the Queen had intended. He made it clear that he viewed the arrangement as settled. He made it clear that he did not see room for the matter to be reconsidered, reinterpreted, or placed into a conversation it had no business entering. The Queen had decided. That, for William, was the end of the discussion. His backing carried real power. As the Prince of Wales and the future king, William occupies a unique position within the current royal family structure. He is not simply a senior family member. He is the next monarch, and the people around him understand that his views today will become policy tomorrow. When William signals clearly that something matters to him, the people in position to act on royal family decisions pay attention. His support for Louise was not something that could be dismissed or managed around. It changed the calculation for anyone who might have been inclined to let the arrangement fade or be absorbed into the broader management of the estate under Charles. There was also something deeply personal in William's involvement. Louise is his cousin, a member of the family he grew up with in private spaces, like Balmoral itself. The royal family's public image sometimes obscures the fact that these are people who have spent real time together, who carry real memories of shared times and private gatherings far from the public eye. William and Louise had both experienced Balmoral as children, as young adults, and as people who had lost the same grandmother. William had a clear sense of what loyalty to the Queen's memory actually looked like. It looked like making sure her wishes for Louise were carried out exactly as she had intended them to be. Beyond the personal dimension, there was a broader principle at work in William's involvement. He is someone who thinks seriously about what the monarchy means and how it should behave. He believes in the importance of family stability and in the idea that the institution should be held together by genuine loyalty rather than appearances. The late Queen had made a personal decision for a granddaughter who had given her real devotion over many years. For that decision to be undermined or allowed to dissolve under the pressures of the new royal order would have been, in William's view, a failure of exactly the kind of loyalty that makes the family function. Camilla's limitation. Camilla has made a long and careful journey to the position she now holds. From the years when public opinion was firmly against her, through the work of building a royal profile that the British public could accept, and finally to her role as queen beside King Charles. She has navigated one of the most complicated paths in the modern history of the monarchy. Balmoral has been part of that journey. She and Charles spent their honeymoon at Burkhall on the estate in 2005. She has walked those grounds, attended church at Crathy Kirk, hosted private events within the castle, and worked steadily to make Balmoral feel like a place where she genuinely belongs. However, there are limits to that belonging, and the situation around Lady Louise's inheritance made those limits visible in a way that Camilla could not ignore. The exclusion was not announced. It did not come in the form of a letter or a conversation held in front of witnesses. It happened in the silent and more telling way that royal exclusions tend to happen, through absence. When the matter of what the Queen had arranged for Louise was being handled and confirmed among the relevant family members and those responsible for managing the estate's private arrangements, Camilla was not part of it. The conversations that shaped the outcome took place between people tied to the Queen's blood family. Charles, in his role as owner of the estate, was necessarily involved at a structural level. But the decision-making that mattered, the part that determined how the Queen's wishes would be respected and protected, moved through a different channel entirely. Camilla's position at Burkhall places her physically close to the heart of the estate. The property sits on the Balmoral grounds, near enough to the main castle and to the other cottages and lodges scattered across that landscape. In practical terms, she is as present at Balmoral as any member of the royal family. But physical proximity is not the same as belonging to the inner circle of a family's most private decisions. The Queen had made her feelings about Balmoral as family space very clear throughout her life. It was a place for her blood family, for the people she had raised and loved in the most personal sense. Camilla had always existed in a slightly different category there, welcome at the estate, but not woven into its deepest fabric. There is a well-documented history to this dynamic. When the Queen was alive and had private gatherings at Balmoral, the royal order of precedence on the estate had always been adjusted in ways that placed the blood family above those who had married into it. The Queen had altered precedence arrangements to reflect her own understanding of family hierarchy during private occasions. Camilla had been placed below Princess Anne and other members of the blood family in those informal orderings. They established a pattern that persisted even after Camilla became queen consort. Her title changed, but the unspoken rules of the estate's most private life did not change alongside her title. For the people managing the Louise situation, the decision to keep Camilla outside of it was not a hostile act. It was a recognition of a boundary that had always existed. The Queen's arrangement for Louise was a matter for the Queen's family. Charles's role as the estate's owner was inevitable, but his involvement was about the mechanics of the property, not about the emotional or moral weight of the decision. That weight belonged to the people who shared the same blood as Louise, the same memories of the same grandmother, the same history of those long summers in the Scottish Highlands. Camilla had none of that. Her presence at Burkhall gave her proximity, but proximity is not the same as inheritance, and it is not the same as belonging. What made the exclusion particularly pointed was the contrast between Camilla's formal position and her actual place in this conversation. As queen, she holds the highest formal rank she has ever held in her life. She sits beside the king at state events and represents the monarchy in ways that were unthinkable when she first entered the public picture. Yet when the family gathered itself around one of its most private and meaningful decisions, the one that concerned a gift left by the late queen for a beloved granddaughter, Camilla was not in the room. She was at Burkhall, where she has always been, within sight of the castle and the cottages and the land, but outside the circle where the real decisions were being made. The people who paid good attention noticed it. Inside the royal household, where every detail of family dynamics is observed and interpreted, the absence of Camilla from the conversation around Louise's inheritance said something that no statement ever could. It said that the Queen's blood family still held a kind of authority that a title alone could not grant. It said that the most private and personal parts of the Balmoral story would continue to belong to the people who had always owned them in the truest sense. And it said, without anyone needing to say it directly, that the new order of the monarchy had its limits when it came to the things the late Queen had decided belonged to her own, safe and secured. There is a particular kind of security that comes not from a lock or a fence, but from the combined will of the people who matter most inside a family structure. Lady Louise Windsor now has that kind of security at Balmoral. The cottage the late Queen arranged for her is not just a building in the Scottish Highlands. It is the physical expression of a decision made by the most important figure in the modern British monarchy, supported by the man who will one day be king, and protected from the kind of interference that could have dismantled it in the months after the Queen's passing. The process was not without its tensions. But the outcome is settled. Louise has her place on the estate, and the people around her know it. William's involvement ensured that the arrangement moved from intention to reality, without being buried under the practical pressures of managing a large private estate through a period of transition. Charles became king and inherited Balmoral within the same terrible week. The machinery of a new reign was moving at full speed, and the smaller, more personal elements of what the Queen had left behind could easily have been deferred, reconsidered, or lost in the shuffle of bigger priorities. William made certain that did not happen. His support created a clear expectation within the family that Louise's inheritance was not a minor detail to be revisited later. It was something to be honored immediately and completely. For Louise herself, the significance of what she has received goes well beyond the practical comfort of having a private retreat in Scotland. She is a young woman who has made clear choices about the kind of royal life she wants to lead. She studied at the University of St. Andrews, the same institution where William and Catherine first built their relationship. She joined the Army Reserve's Officer Training Corps. She has continued carriage driving in the tradition her grandfather, Prince Philip, established, competing in events that require real skill and commitment. In April 2021, she received her grandfather's driving ponies and carriage as an inheritance. The following year, in 2022, she proudly drove one of his carriages past the Queen during the Royal Windsor Horse Show, honoring the tradition he loved. As a royal, she has built a life with genuine substance and direction, staying largely outside the public spotlight while developing real abilities and a real sense of herself. The cottage at Balmoral anchors her to the family's most private and beloved place in a way that reflects all of that. The cottage also places Louise within a family tradition that now stretches across 3 generations. The Queen Mother gave Tamnagar to William. The late Queen gave this property to Louise. In both cases, an older generation chose a specific grandchild, identified a specific place within the estate's landscape, and made a loving decision to create a lasting bond between that person and Balmoral. These gifts are more than gestures of affection. They are acts of placement, made in the most concrete possible way. They create a chain of connection between the private property of the royal family and the individuals the family most wants to see, rooted in its deepest traditions. The situation around Camilla's exclusion from the process revealed something important about the way power actually operates within the royal family, separate from the formal titles and hierarchies that govern public appearances. Camilla may be queen, yet when the family gathered itself around the decision that would define Louise's place in this landscape, Camilla was not invited in. The blood family drew its own line and held it. That line is not cruel. It is simply honest about where certain loyalties and certain histories begin and end. It is a line the Queen herself drew in her own way for decades, and the people who loved her most understood exactly what it meant. What the whole process reveals about the royal family's shifting interior is more layered than it first appears. Charles is king and holds enormous formal authority. Camilla is queen and has worked for years to build a position that cannot be easily dismissed. But inside the private heart of the family, William is already operating with the kind of moral will that future kings carry before they are crowned. He moved to protect his cousin's inheritance, not because he was asked to, but because he decided it was right. That kind of self-directed action, grounded in loyalty and in a clear sense of what the family should stand for, is exactly the quality that shows the difference between holding a title and leading an institution. Lady Louise Windsor will return to Balmoral as she always has. She will drive carriages across the same land her grandfather drove them. She will walk the same paths her grandmother loved. She will look out from the same highland landscape that shaped her family's private life for generations. But she will return now to something that is fully hers, a cottage that carries the imprint of the late Queen's love and judgment. A piece of Scotland that belongs, because the right people decided it should, to a young woman who earned it through decades of genuine devotion to the grandmother who appreciated her. The estate endures, and within it, quietly and firmly, so does Louise. Do you think King Charles has the power to overturn the late Queen's wish to give Lady Louise the cottage at Balmoral? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.